People who grew up with strict parents. What was their most unreasonable rule? Have a friend who isn't allowed to go out if he's already had too much fun this weekend. That's the only reason. They think he'll become corrupted if he has too much fun and that he won't know how to work. He's in college. This isn't even the first time I've heard this. What is going through parents' minds when they say this? Is it actually that too much fun makes you want to work less? That's quite dystopian. Oh, that's weird. Story 2. I was not allowed to talk to boys. One Christmas Eve day, I was doing last-minute shopping in the downtown of our little town. I ran into 2 male friends from my German class and we talked for several minutes and wished each other a Merry Christmas. Oh, I was 15 at the time. My older sister drove by, saw me, told my parents I was hanging out with boys. When I walked in the house, both my parents were waiting and the yelling began. Some Christmas Eve. And these are absolutely the parents who are going to be like, where are my grandchildren when you're like 25? It's like, oh, sorry mom and dad, I never got to date. Story 3. I think the most unreasonable was that my siblings and I weren't allowed to know where we were going during car rides. If we would ask, we were told, business, and figure out we were going to the store or whatever, only after we arrived to our destination. This lasted until I moved out. Another was asking for permission to use the bathroom every time. That didn't last long. Story 4. My parents were slack. My best friend's parents were so strict. She would escape to my house for freedom. 12th grade, prom. Her parents allowed her to go to prom, but said she wasn't allowed to dance. We all went to prom, had fun dancing, until she saw her parents standing at the back watching. She then moved out for university. After her first year, she came home to work for the summer. She had been on her own for a year and supporting herself, and her parents gave her a 9 p.m. curfew. She spent a lot of time at my house that summer. She was married by the next summer and didn't have to deal with it. Story 5. I had a friend who wasn't allowed to sit on the couch, no matter the circumstances. That was the first time I realized something was really wrong in his house. The kicker? It was a crappy couch, so it's not like he was gonna ruin it. Edit. Responding to a gazillion people at once. To the folks looking for logic, you'll find none. No, the parents weren't saving the couch for company. No, the kids didn't have a history of damaging the couch. No, the kids weren't little troublemakers. They were surprisingly well-behaved teens. Surprising because of how they were raised. This is about control, not logic. Domestic abuse is always about control. Don't let anyone try to convince you otherwise. Even after adding a note about child abuse, I'm still getting jokes about how my friend must be a dog. Thanks, Reddit. Story 6. I have too many things to name growing up in an Asian household, but the one that was the most embarrassing was I was not allowed to shave my legs or armpits, and I hit puberty at an early age. So I had really hairy armpits and legs and was forced to wear shorts to gym class. I was so embarrassed about my legs that I would wear shorts with opaque pantyhose, which just made the whole situation worse, and I was the butt of many jokes in middle school. My mom has apologized thousands of times since, but it still brings back crappy memories. I gotta say though, props to your mom for apologizing. I feel like a lot of parents never apologize for stuff like that. They either always think they're right or don't want to show weakness to their children or whatever. Apologizing is really big of your mom. It definitely sucks you had to go through that though. Story 7. Was forced to drop out of school in the 5th grade because my grandmother believed that most people have no souls and were demon-possessed. She said that the world was unsafe to roam freely because Satan was trying to corrupt God's children. This led to a very sheltered life and very silly things like having to pray over every individual item that entered the house. Food, toiletries, dish soap, you name it. I'd get woken up at 2 a.m. to be screamed at for 3+ hours over something God had told her that I did wrong. So, yeah. I guess the most unreasonable rule I grew up with was not being allowed to leave the house. This sounds like some kind of psychosis, to be honest. When it comes to these super overzealous religious types, that's typically what it ends up being. At some point, their religion got crossed with some wires in their brain that weren't connecting or weren't talking properly, and this is what happens. That sucks, OP. I hope you're doing all right now. Story 8. My mom was insanely controlling about food. Weird rules were in place, like 1 slice of lunch meat per sandwich. No one but her was allowed to cook. She would make one giant batch of spaghetti or something and we would have leftovers for days, and she only had to make dinner twice a week. She didn't work or anything, just didn't like cooking every day. Breakfast was cold cereal, and you'd only be allowed a small bowl with just enough milk to moisten it. Occasionally, she would bake something she called corn toasties, which was simply cornbread baked in a sheet pan. She'd cut them into squares and fill the freezer with them. We could have one of those for breakfast as an alternative. Once, when I was 14, I bought a pack of hot dogs at the store, snuck them home, and lit the grill. I was almost done cooking them when she came out screaming about fire hazards and swatted the plate out of my hand. She had been making spaghetti. What an ungrateful little bastard I was. So then she orders a pizza for the rest of my family, wraps individual servings of spaghetti in freezer paper, and puts them away. She tells me I will be eating nothing else until it's all gone. Took me about 2 months to choke it all down. Went without eating a lot of days. I was also grounded for over a year, but I sure learned a lot about consequences. That has to constitute as some kind of child abuse, right? Nutrition is extremely important. I guarantee OP was malnourished in some ways. Story 9. My father was very, very strict. I wasn't allowed to have alone time with my mother. He beat the crap out of me constantly. But the oddest thing that still bugs me to this day is that he would burn all my things as punishment. And I get it, seeing my toys and valuables burning sucked, and I probably learned some lessons. But he didn't only burn toys. He would burn everything. Every year or so for school, we would go and buy me some new school clothes and shoes. He would also burn those, like sometimes days after he bought them. At 8 years old, I remember thinking, you now have to buy me more clothes. But that wasn't the point, I suppose. He once took me to the Palace of Auburn Hills in Detroit to see the Globetrotters one year. And during the night, he bought me a Globetrotters basketball and jersey. We had a fun night. The very next day, I had left something on the floor in my room, and his punishment, among other things, was to burn the basketball and jersey he bought for like $150 less than 24 hours earlier. It just never made sense to me. My friends would joke about it all throughout middle school and high school. This is some intense manipulation. This isn't a strict parent. This is an abusive parent, just to be clear. If I had to guess, and I could be way off base here, but I feel like burning stuff that he paid for would probably help fuel his anger towards you and kind of justify it in a way, because then it could get very cyclical, right? Like, oh, this kid made me spend all this money on this stuff. I bought it for them and now I'm burning it. Oh, I hate this kid. Because in that mindset of like an abuser or just a weirdo, it's really easy to remove yourself from the situation and just blame the other factors in it. Either way, though, definitely not great. I'm sorry you had to go through that, OP. Story 10. Oh, God. I wasn't allowed to go out, like, ever. If I was going to hang out with someone, it had to be on the weekend, planned at least a week ahead. And my parents had to meet their parents and drive me there. They would come get me before the sun went down. And not a rule, but if I got up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night or was reading because I couldn't sleep, my mom would come screaming up the stairs, "Why are you up?" and sometimes hit me. I wasn't allowed to close the door in my room. There's more, but that's what I can think of right now. Mostly, my mother would just yell about everything. Story 11. My mom was very strict about the ratings of movies and video games. One year for Christmas, a relative gave me a copy of Star Wars Shadows of the Empire for the N64. It was a T for teen rated game, and I wouldn't be turning 13 for another 4 weeks. My mom had my dad drive me to Toys R Us to return the game. He walked into the store and over to the games and had me pick out an E for Everyone rated game. We proceeded to check out, and as we went to the car, he handed me not only the new game, but the game we were supposed to have returned to buy it as well. And he just told me to not let her catch me playing it. 4 weeks away from 13. Can't play T for teen rated games. I never really understood people who were super strict on the ratings, although I was strict on myself on the ratings when I was younger. I remember I was like 12 and my dad was like, "Hey, son, do you want to watch The Matrix?" And I said, no, I shouldn't or something. But seriously, what are these parents thinking? It's like, when you turn 13, your brain chemistry as a whole changes and you're ready for the game? Yeah, I don't know. Story 12. We couldn't go sledding during the winter or any other season, obviously, because my mom was a neat freak and didn't want any snow slogged into the garage. So no snow playing of any kind, really. Never built a snowman. Did go sledding when I was an adult, though. It was pretty great. All of our clothes in our closet had to be arranged by color, descending in order by shade. So, for example, midnight blue at one end of the blue section and Tar Heel blue at the other. There was a system in place for colors too, so if the yellows were by the purples, for example, there would be hell to pay. No shoes on in the house under any circumstances. Was super uncomfortable when my brother's friend who had prosthetic legs and always had shoes on came over and didn't take his shoes off. Mom got really mad and confronted him. No Legos or puzzles allowed, as they make messes and look like disorder. I freaking love puzzles as an adult. One of my favorite hobbies. Well, you got all that puzzle practice by ordering your closet by color, I guess. These are definitely some whack rules. Story 13. I was not allowed to wear makeup or shave until 16. My mom was controlling about food. Everything was kept track of. I had to be in marching band in order to get my permit. I had a job, but even if I worked second shift, which I did and came home at 11, I would have to clear the plates from the table for the dinner that they ate. If I asked to hang out with a friend in the presence of said friend, the answer was automatically no. I was only allowed to do things if the friend or their parent was paying for it. The straw that broke the camel's back and ultimately made me move out at 16 was that I had to live like a boarder. Showers cost $5. A load of laundry was $1 for washer, $1 for dryer. Telephone time cost 25 cents per minute. It wasn't that bad. Like, it was bad, but it wasn't that bad until the end. What do you mean you pay $5 for a shower? I guarantee you don't shower for a week, your mother will change her mind. Insanely controlling rules, I hate that. Story 14. Well, I pretty much couldn't do anything at all. I wasn't even allowed to put posters on my wall. I'm not sure whether it was to protect the wall or some other silly reason. All I wanted was to put up a cute poster of a cuddly seal, so I ended up sticking it behind my door. My dad once told me that he was going to ground me due to my poor performance in school, so I simply responded, "Go ahead, ground me. It's not like I go anywhere anyway." His dead silence after that was an acknowledgement that he knew I had a point there. My radio was taken away during exams because I had to concentrate. The radio helped me concentrate. Story 15. I was from a large family and discipline was very strict. If myself or one of my siblings broke one of the major rules, my parents would hold a truth session. All the children would be brought to my dad's study where the guilty party would be given an opportunity to confess. If nobody came forward, we would be hit in order of ascending age. The eldest four were hit with a sewer rod, while in deference to their age, the youngest would get a whack of a bamboo stick. A sewer rod is basically a 4-foot-long flexible rubber rod, around an inch thick and with a metal cap. It would leave the most remarkable welts, horrendous things really. Anyway, this would continue until someone admitted their guilt. At that point, they would receive the blows that everyone else had received to that point. So, that was awful. I fully acknowledge that. I'm under no illusions. However, that wasn't the actual unreasonableness. No. The unreasonable part was that the person who caused the truth session didn't always receive the accrued punishment owed for having their siblings beaten. Sometimes they could just be let go, making their siblings hate them for causing pain to them. There would be no explanation. The study door would be opened and we would all be told to leave. That meant you could be rewarded for holding out, and avoid the punishment you definitely would have gotten for admitting it at the beginning. My parents now tell funny stories about how when I was a child and I'd done something wrong, I'd always begin with, "Let me tell you my story." They would chortle at my childish phrasing while I recall the terror that such an approach was meant to stave off. This is full-on, like, prison tactics. Are you kidding me? By turning the children against each other, you're creating an incredibly hostile, horrible home environment. This is almost torturous. Oh my god. This poor family. Story 16. Was only allowed 45 minutes of computer time daily. If anything happened to the computer, it was the video game's fault. Not the shady links my mom still clicks on 14 years later, of course. Story 17. I have a ton. One was that I had to always give 24 hours notice if I wasn't going to be home for dinner any night of the week. Because, dinner plans are never made the day of. This lasted until I moved when I was 19. Now, I thought that would get better, but it actually became worse. My sister and I go to dinner to our parents every Sunday, and now they need a 72 hours notice if we're not going to be there. Also had 10 p.m. curfew every day of the week until I moved out. Sleeping in was never a thing. 9 a.m. wake-up call otherwise. Parents had sensors on our doors so they could tell if we left our rooms in the night. Cameras covering every inch of the outside as well. We weren't allowed to use the bathrooms after midnight. My stepmother came storming out of her room one night when I went to use the bathroom at 2:30 a.m. because, sometimes you wake up and need to go. And I was sick of peeing in a bottle because of their frickin' rule. She stormed out and confronted me and looked like she was about to hit me. I said, "I dare you," as I was ready to hit her back. Story 18. When I think back on it, there weren't any really unreasonable standing rules. More like every now and then my parents would explode on something minor to make up for the lack of parenting. Now, I love my parents, but they don't seem to get the idea that not being around much screwed their kids up a bit. I was extremely shy and withdrawn, and my brother is a narcissist. It would take quite a few paragraphs to explain, but suffice to say their lack of checks and balances on him and my family's doting on him legitimized his belief that everything revolves around him. On the other hand, nobody paid attention to me, which is partially on me. I'm quite happy to fade into the background in any situation. I hate attention. Maybe because I didn't get any when I was young, and when I did it felt weird. I don't really know. But yeah, I specifically remember the times where my dad was shouting in anger at me and neither made any sense. But yeah, I specifically remember the few times where my dad was shouting in anger at me and never made any sense. Once he told us during the middle of summer when we were about 13 and 15 to not go outside while he was out. Mind you, we were 13 and 15, and literally every single day during the summer, no one was home, and we were outside unsupervised all frickin' day. So my brother was like, rules don't apply to me, and goes outside. Dad came home and starts screaming at him, then gets pissed at me and whacks me for not stopping him. At this time, dude was like twice my size and no one could tell him anything, so come on. Another time on my birthday, all I wanted was a remote-controlled car, so I got one. Brother proceeds to take it out while I'm not there. Idiot tries to control it and ride a bike at the same time. He runs over it and breaks it. Puts it back, doesn't tell anyone. I find it and get upset. Dad, of course, thinks I'm lying to cover my own butt and I get whacked a bit. Brother thought it was funny. Instead of parenting, Dad went the easy route, assigned blame and punishment. Then went back to doing whatever the hell it was he was doing. Fast forward 20 plus years, brother is rapidly heading for a divorce that he just can't believe is his fault. Haven't said a word to him in maybe 3 years, honestly lost track. I can't talk to him because he'll blame random bad stuff that happened to him on something I or my best friend did like 25 years ago. Dad is disabled, lays around all day, can't understand why no one comes to visit. Mom, love her to death, but she's an idiot, makes excuses for the both of them. I used to idolize my father and I glossed over a lot. Been thinking about him a lot lately and coming to terms with the fact that he's a jerk, much like my brother. And it sucks, but hey, truth is the best policy. Story 19. When I was in 5th grade, I wrote some stuff in my diary about pleasuring myself, and like a month later, my mom went through all my stuff. She would randomly go into my room, tear it apart, and I would always get in trouble for something. And then I would have to clean up the mess and be grounded for whatever amount she felt like that day. So, anyway, she found the diary entry. She picks me up from school and won't talk to me. I get home and my door was removed from my room. The diary entry was taped on the wall and I was threatened with a belt if I didn't answer all of her invasive questions. Screwed up. Now, this is a great way to traumatize your child forever. What an absolutely horrific response to something completely natural. Although if I had to guess, I would say that OP's mom probably didn't think that it was completely natural. I agree with OP. Screwed up. Story 20. Not my parents, but my best friend's parents were insanely strict growing up. When we were preteens and sleepovers were all the rage, if we wanted to have one, we literally lived on the same street. It's a 2-minute walk between our parents' houses. We had to plan it at least a month in advance, if not more. Even then, for whatever reason, her parents would only agree to them rarely. So really, we would only get to have like 2 or 3 a year. One time, I started getting sick at school on a Friday and we had planned a sleepover. Ages ago, as usual, for that night. I was feeling absolutely awful, but tried my best to stay at school because, obviously, if I went home sick, the sleepover would be called off. Made it to lunch and then my teacher called me over and said I was white as a ghost and burning up and had to go home. My best friend and I were devastated. Sad day. Story 21. I was interested in learning about Wicca because I was young and in high school. Early 2000s. Harry Potter was still happening and all that stuff. My mom and stepdad found out by reading an email I sent to my cousin. It was the summer and they freaked out. Took everything. I couldn't read, I couldn't listen to music, I couldn't watch TV or movies with the family, I couldn't hang out with friends, couldn't talk to my cousin anymore. Basically anything that might bring me pleasure was taken. They made me do chores all day, would go on family outings without me. Soon I became a shell of a person. I was going to unalive myself. I wanted to, I was just scared of death, so I decided not to go through with it. So I turned myself off. They hated it. They weren't getting a rise out of me anymore. Anything they said to me to extending my sentence, I wouldn't react to. Since their narcissism relied on a victim, I wasn't a source anymore. So they extended my grounding even further. They could have told me to go pick up dog crap in the backyard with my teeth and I wouldn't have flinched. My stepdad's family, just as terrible, would come over and belittle me as well. I was told to smile. So I would humor them and flash an empty smile for a second and return to my blank expression I had to find solace in. All this to save me from going to hell. The only thing that saved me that summer was my visitation with my dad. My mom and stepdad tried to paint him in a bad light, like he was the abusive one. Even as a kid, I knew my dad didn't make me feel as bad and empty as they did. I eventually got through it. Years later, about 4 years ago now, I ended up working a job unexpectedly with a girl I used to play with in the neighborhood. I always wondered why she stopped showing up. When I wasn't home or in another part of the house, she came to the door and asked to play. One of my parents opened the door and told her I didn't want to play with her anymore. I always wondered why she never hung out with me or talked to me. Even finding this out in a more recent term, I cried and apologized to her. I could have had a great friendship with a lot of people, but they just wanted to alienate and control me. Unfortunately, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I don't talk to them anymore, but I do still live in the same city as them and have a lot of social anxiety because of that. One of my roommates exhibits some of the behavior my parents were so kind as to bestow on me. It's making things difficult to handle. I just want people to be happy and live in a healthy environment. It's so screwed up that the biggest monsters in this world are the people closest to you. This thread was a lot of abuse, mostly. It was definitely a little darker than I was hoping for, but hey, at the very least, I hope everyone listening to this grows up to be a better parent if you choose to have kids than these parents are. So I hope you learned something, and I also hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are. I will see you in the next one.